Amazing discovery, soldier and his K9 expose hidden truth after little girl's touching whisper. Jake stood by the picnic tables, a plate of food untouched before him. He watched families laugh, play, and share stories beneath the midday sun. It all felt surreal. Although he was home, his heart remained on the distant, foreign soil he had tread for too long. Shadow, his loyal K9 companion, lay at his feet, sensing Jake's unease. The sound of children's laughter was a backdrop, while the taste of fear clung to his throat. A past riddled with the horrors of war had left scars that no one at the picnic could see. Both physically and mentally, he felt overshadowed by the weight of memories, moments of chaos, fear, and powerlessness. As other veterans proudly paraded their wartime stories, Jake stumbled over his own. There was a hollowness inside him, a stark contrast to the vibrant life around him. How could he connect with them when he felt so displaced, so lost? Before he could brood further, a sweet, innocent voice sliced through his thoughts. "Don't worry, Daisy. We'll figure it out," a little girl said, kneeling next to a scrappy dog. Jake shifted his attention, squinting against the brightness. Her whispers carried a weight that stopped his heart. She was talking about losing her home, the very thing that brought a sense of safety and belonging. Her words struck a nerve, each syllable digging into Jake's chest, rattling the truth he was refusing to confront. He felt an unsettling churn in his gut. What had he come back to? He had fought for justice, for families, yet it seemed life in his town had become a battlefield in itself, families dangling on the brink of loss. It wasn't the gunfire or explosions that haunted him now, but deceit lurking under the surface of those familiar streets. Jake's strong protective instincts awakened, and he found himself teetering on the edge between action and inaction. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The sense of injustice took root in Jake. He was a soldier, but who was he without a mission? Trapped in the pressures of his own mind, he moved from the sound of laughter to the somber whispers of families burdened with fear. He envisioned confronting the businessmen whose fraudulent property schemes preyed on the vulnerable. But doubts crept in. What if no one believed him? What if he failed? Failing would mean letting those families down. Shame flickered through him, a reminder of combat. With every revelation of deceit he uncovered, Jake felt the boundaries of his own sanity stretch. Flashbacks clamored in his mind, unwelcomed images of fallen comrades mingling with the disillusionment of seeing his community erode from within. He felt that familiar tension coiling tight around his heart, the fear of vulnerability battling the urge to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. How could he fight this battle so far removed from the front lines? His breathing quickened as he grappled with the enormity of what lay ahead. Shadows deepened around him, both external and within. The confrontation loomed over Jake like a specter, urging him forward. Who could he truly trust now? And was he strong enough to take a stand? A storm brewed inside him, and with it came the realization, it wasn't just the truth he was wrestling with, but the very essence of who he was becoming. Would he risk everything for the sake of justice, or would he remain shackled by the fear that had followed him back home like a dark shadow? The picnic cheers faded as the battle within him intensified, leaving no resolution in sight. Jake's eyes, once fixed on the cheerful families, began to harden with resolve as shadows charged his spirit. The girl's whisper still echoed in his mind, her concern for a dog, for a family, resonating through his own sense of loss. The shaking weight of indecision and fear began to morph into something sharper, an undeniable call to action. What if the stakes were higher than he'd thought? What if the deceit affected more than just his own familiar circles? The very streets where he had grown up now felt tainted, and the facade of normalcy writhed like a serpent, its venom seeping into the lives of his neighbors. The very thought ignited a flame deep within him, overpowering the persistent chill of trauma. He clenched his fists, soaking in the sun's warm rays that brushed against his skin as though offering a promise of clarity. Shadow shifted at his feet, sensing Jake's transformation. The dog nudged his ankle, offering support as he had done countless times before in the heat of combat. In that moment, Jake remembered that he was still capable of fighting back. Maybe all those weeks of training, those hours spent with Shadow on reconnaissance missions, had not faded like the memories of battle. His heart now raced not from anxiety but from realization. He needed to regain control not just of his fears, but also of something bigger, something that could restore dignity to those whose lives had been stripped bare by deception. He envisioned himself no longer a war survivor merely trying to blend back into normalcy, but a defender rising from the ashes of disbelief. Jake resolved to dig deeper, to uncover the unsettling truths without the cloak of military authority. This would take more than guns and brute strength. He needed to infiltrate the very elements that fueled the scams. He remembered stories whispered among comrades about corrupt officials and their schemes thriving under the cover of darkness. The world of business was a different battlefield, filled with cunning and manipulation, and he was ready to navigate it. Strategizing in the sanctuary of his thoughts, Jake's next steps began to take form. He envisioned discreet conversations with families to gather their experiences, establishing a web of trust. Every anecdote would be another piece to a puzzle more significant than any combat mission he had ever undertaken. Through families, he could build a foundation to challenge the deceit head-on. Yet, doubt began to creep back in. What if these families were scared? What if involvement only led to backlash instead of justice? An internal voice screamed at him to abandon the plan, to retreat to the relative safety of ignorance. Nevertheless, he steadied himself. He was a soldier, molded to confront darkness, not cower before it. As he shifted from the picnic area, he met the eyes of the little girl. Her hopeful gaze pierced through the haze of his uncertainty. He had a purpose again, and it started with making their life a little safer. In that moment, her childish resolve rekindled something dormant within Jake. Before moving ahead, he had one fundamental question to answer: how far was he willing to go for a truth that might put him in the crosshairs of retaliation? He took a deep breath, feeling both exhilaration and trepidation, for the next stage was now clearer than ever. The time had come to face those who had abused their power, but more than that, it was time to confront his demons and decide who he truly intended to be in a world that left scars. As he walked with Shadow trotting beside him, fleeting images of conflict impinged upon their journey. What could lie around the corner, waiting to test his resolve yet again? Jake awoke the next morning with a determined clarity. The sun's first rays filtered through his window, casting a gentle light over the disheveled remnants of his uniform tossed lazily on a chair. He noticed a sense of calm amidst the chaos, a contrast to the frayed nerves that had dictated his life for far too long. Shadow lay at the foot of the bed, awake and watchful, a silent guardian ready to accompany him into uncharted territory. Today marked the beginning of a new mission, one that required more than brawn. He needed to harness the keen instincts and critical thinking he'd honed during his service. With a renewed sense of purpose, he grabbed a notebook and began jotting down the names of families he'd seen around the neighborhood, the ones who had seemed hesitant to engage, the worried expressions he recognized all too well. His first destination was the Morales family, who lived just a few blocks away. Jake had seen them struggling at the grocery store, their faces revealing a depth of worry that he couldn't ignore. He felt a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation as he approached their home, rehearsing the dialogue in his mind, striving for the right blend of empathy and assertiveness. When he knocked on the door, the warmth of the sun contrasted sharply with the cool uncertainty of the moment. Mrs. Morales answered, her brow furrowed as she recognized him. Wariness flickered in her eyes, but underneath it lay the trace of hope, eerily similar to that of the little girl from the day before. "Mrs. Morales," he began, watching her expression closely, "I'm Jake. I'm trying to understand what's happening around here. I'd like to help, if you'll let me." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Jake feared he had overstepped. Then, something shifted in her gaze. "What do you know?" she asked, the tension in her voice palpable. Jake took a step forward, letting the sincerity of his intent seep through. "I've seen families struggling. It's like there's something bigger at play, and I want to figure it out. You're not alone. I don't carry any military weight anymore. Just me and Shadow here. But I'm willing to listen and help any way I can." Mrs. Morales hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come inside, but you must understand it's dangerous to talk about this." He nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle deeply within him. As they sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with fear and uncertainty, she began to share her experiences, stories of deceit, of a landlord who demanded more money for repairs that never came, and the darkness that pooled around them, fed by unseen hands. With each detail, Jake's resolve solidified. He took notes, mindful of every word as if they held the keys to dismantling the intricate web of lies that had plagued these families. The more he learned, the more he realized this fight wasn't just about him, it was about restoring trust, safety, and dignity. Their conversation deepened his understanding of the community's struggles, each revelation a sliver of insight that felt like fuel to his fire. Yet, a new wave of concern washed over him. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became that confronting these powerful figureheads would not go unnoticed. The risk of retaliation loomed heavily, a specter threatening to complicate his mission before it even began. After saying goodbye, he walked back home, Shadow trotting beside him, head raised as if sensing Jake's tension. Deep in thought, he ran his hand along the dog's back. How far was he willing to go for the truths he had begun to unearth? It struck him he was redefining not only his purpose but also his understanding of courage. He would have to build alliances, forge relationships with others willing to stand against the injustice festering beneath their feet. The day ahead was uncertain, but Jake felt alive with possibility. Decisions loomed like tall shadows over the horizon, ones that would test his very essence. All that remained now was to gather allies, to bring more voices into the fold, and they would surely find themselves in danger's path. But with every step forward into the fray, they might just dismantle an invisible empire built on deceit. And as Jake ventured forward, he knew the hour was approaching for his first major confrontation. Would he be prepared to face the people hidden behind the curtain, ready to unleash their fury upon him? Jake sat at his kitchen table, notebooks strewn around him like fallen leaves, each filled with scrawled notes, lists, and sketches, fragments of conversations that had pierced the fog of his past life. In the soft light filtering through his window, his resolve began to crystallize. How often had he faced fear in the service? Now, it felt like an abstract concept, a lingering presence, spurring him on yet holding him back. His mind drifted to the Morales family, their stories etched in his memory. There were deeper layers to uncover, and the kernel of another thought emerged: who else shared their plight? He reached for a new notebook, flipping it open to an empty page, and wrote the heading, Potential Allies. Each name felt like a stepping stone toward a greater truth, a hidden army waiting to stand against the unseen forces oppressing them. He couldn't afford to let doubts cloud his judgment. They had to trust him, but how do you earn trust when your own past was a collection of hardened lessons? As the day wore on, Jake's focus sharpened. He grabbed his jacket, whistled for Shadow, and set out again, this time with a bolder intent, like a soldier heading into a new campaign. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was gathering allies, reaching out to others who might share their stories. His next visit was to the Adams family. Jake remembered seeing Mr. Adams at the hardware store, his face pale and fingers jittering when pricing a simple repair. With determination, he approached their small two-story home, every step forward laced with the weight of his shared knowledge. He knocked again, the sound echoing through the stillness. Mr. Adams opened the door, surprise and brief alarm flashing in his eyes. "I'm here to listen, Mr. Adams. I know things are difficult." Jake spoke softly yet firmly, as if adjusting a compass. After a hesitant pause, Mr. Adams gestured him inside. The air was thick with silence, a reflection of repressed anxiety. Once seated, Jake leaned forward, prepared to absorb whatever burden this man had carried, a necessary weight in their shared struggle. "The landlord wants to raise the rent again," Mr. Adams began, his voice tinged with desperation. "He says it's for improvements, but every time I ask about repairs, I get excuses." With each sentence, Jake's mind raced. The words were familiar, they mirrored Mrs. Morales's stories with uncanny precision. Could the same strategy be behind all of this? The realization propelled him to ask probing questions. He inquired about other families on the street, those whose shadows stirred uneasily, those with whispers fading into obscurity. What surprised Jake the most was the burst of energy that accompanied the unfolding narrative. Each shared experience, each bout of fury, filled him with clarity. The very act of listening initiated ripples of empowerment. They were no longer alone, they were connecting, igniting a dialogue that transcended their individual fears. But as he listened, an unsettling awareness began to creep in. The threats that hung over these families were real, and if he sought to incite change, he would be dragging them into the firing line with him. Suddenly the stakes felt exponentially higher. The risks were not merely his own anymore, they extended to the very people he sought to help. As he departed the Adams residence, the heaviness of his role enveloped him, yet beneath it lay a burgeoning sense of purpose. He was no longer just a former soldier, he had morphed into a vigilant advocate, an unwilling yet determined warrior against an unseen enemy. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon as he stepped outside, darker and more tumultuous than before. His heart raced, an unfamiliar pulse of determination surged through him. The confrontation loomed closer, and with it, shadows of intimidation danced in the back of his mind. What newly uncovered truths would he have to face? Could he muster the strength not just for himself but for those depending on him? They were at the brink of something monumental, but an impending storm was brewing, and its fierce winds threatened to expose them all. The clock was ticking. Who would step into the light with him, and how many would be left behind in the tumult? As doubt clawed at him, Jake knew one thing: the next step would be the defining moment. Would he be brave enough to shatter the silence that enveloped their lives? Each breath Jake took felt weighted with anticipation as he steered shadow along the familiar streets, the sun slipping behind the horizon. The once vibrant neighborhood had transformed into a muted landscape, shadows sitting heavy atop the pavement. He had learned enough from the Adams family to identify the oppressive pattern lurking just beneath the surface, families trapped beneath the thumb of a system designed to subvert them. That night, the flickering light of his desk lamp became a lighthouse as he returned home. Jake sat with his notebook spread wide before him, each filled with the essence of every life he had touched. The names he had written were not just a list, they were lifelines of hope, connecting him to the heartbeats of those in turmoil. He flipped through the pages, wondering how many could be drawn into deeper discussions. But fear gnawed at him. How could he transform the energy ignited within those conversations into tangible action? He could no longer sit idle, watching lives unravel around him. A plan formed in his mind like the cracking of dawn against the night, to gather families, to rally them not as individuals, but as an undeniable collective force against the weight of oppression. He felt a sudden pull to the Eastworth Community Center, a blue building that had been the heart of the neighborhood for years, a place of gatherings, a refuge for children after school, where Jessica once played and laughed. His pulse quickened, the image of her cherubic face flashed across his mind, a spirit unbroken despite the world's chaos. He remembered her mother's tearful words about facing eviction. Not wanting to lose momentum, he decided to make the center his next stop. He needed to see if others shared the same sentiment about their struggles. As he approached, the sounds of children playing filtered through the glass doors. That joyous noise clashed with the dark thoughts circling in his mind. Inside, the aroma of hot dogs greeted him, lingering outside like the hopes of the community. Families moved in and out, their laughter punctuated by muffled conversations filled with worry. Pasting on a smile as though it were armor, Jake searched for familiar faces. Across the room, he spotted Ms. Wong, the center's director, holding court over a group of parents. Drawing in a deep breath, he navigated through the thrumming energy of the gathering, intent on connecting. He approached her, and she welcomed him with an embrace that felt simultaneously warm and heavy. "Jake, I hadn't seen you in ages. How can we help you?" Her eyes sparkled, but her expression shifted when she noticed the unease behind his smile. "I'm looking to talk about our community," he started slowly. "There are so many struggles that families face, and I think it's time we help each other." Her brow furrowed slightly as she nodded. "We've been dealing with a lot, but it's tough to bring everyone together. No one wants to step in the crosshairs." As their conversation deepened, Jake felt the familiar swell of fury igniting within him. They weren't just discussing hardship, they were confronting silencing confessions. It was clearer than ever, the enemies were formidable, but pinning the blame solely on external forces would dim the light of those feeling powerless. "What if we organized a gathering?" Jake proposed, heart racing at the thought. "It doesn't have to be confrontational. Just a space to share stories that could give people the courage to unite." Ms. Wong regarded him quietly, weighing his words. "It's a noble thought, but people are scared, Jake. They've been failed too many times." Her words echoed in his mind. Fear was the enemy, and if he couldn't break that barrier, their efforts would remain impotent. Yet, he had uncovered a kernel of potential. Together they could undermine the very fear that consumed them. As they agreed to start planning, a torrent of emotions coursed through Jake, an awareness that this idea held the weight of an awakening. His own convictions would soon face the hardest tests not only of self but of trustworthiness in the eyes of the people he sought to rally. Standing by the window, watching the twilight transform the skyline, kept Jake rooted in his purpose. He could sense the storm brewing both for himself and for those whose lives were disrupted. With every shadow draping over the land, he realized they were entering a battle far larger than himself. An awakening was needed, a collective roar to drown out the silence of fear. But would he rise to the challenge, or falter when the confrontation pressed dangerously close? The next phase loomed, a reckoning waiting at the door. What personal sacrifices would he have to make for the sake of their shared voices? And could he stand firm against the tempest that would surely follow? The next morning dawned with a hue of uncertainty swirling outside Jake's window, painting his thoughts in shades of doubt and resolve. As he brewed coffee, the hollowness of his apartment echoed back at him, a tangible reminder of his solitary journey. Yet, this time, an unfamiliar excitement simmered beneath his surface, an urgency to act that he had not felt before. He grabbed his notebooks and a pen, each page representing a thread to be woven into something greater. The gathering was the key. It had to be transformative, not just a gathering of voices, but a clarion call. Intent set in motion, he meticulously outlined his vision, a blueprint of hope that interlaced the struggles of individuals into a collective narrative. Jake felt the tremulous pulse of anxiety as he planned how to present his ideas. Speaking with Ms. Wong had ignited a fire within him, but the unease of stepping into a leadership role frayed his confidence. He could visualize the looks of skepticism from the community, the whispered judgments from those who had lost faith. But he needed to be that beacon. It was now or never. As he prepared to head back to the center, a thought intruded: would anyone even show up? This uncertainty nagged at him like a persistent itch, but there was no turning back now. He equated each potential attendee to a voice craving to be heard. It emboldened him, breathing life into his faltering resolve. Approaching Eastworth Community Center, the site was both welcoming and intimidating. Families flowed in and out, echoing the dichotomy of laughter and worry. Among the ebb and flow, he saw a mother hesitating in the doorway, her eyes darting nervously, an embodiment of the fear he sought to eradicate. "Hey!" Jake called out, raising a hand to catch her attention. She turned, apprehension etched across her face. She introduced herself as Maria, circling her baby in her arms protectively. Jake noticed her cautiousness, the careful way her eyes avoided the passing crowds. "Are you here for the gathering?" he asked, heart racing. She looked down, as if weighing her response. "I don't know, I mean we've been let down before. It's hard to trust." Jake's stomach twisted. This was precisely what he needed to address how to dismantle that very hesitation and mistrust. "I get it. But if we don't speak up, nothing changes. That's why I'm here, to listen to voices that matter, to share our stories. Together, we can bring about change." Her gaze held his for a moment longer, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "You really think so?" "I have to believe it," Jake replied, his own conviction surprising him. As he stepped into the heart of the center, he found Ms. Wong reviewing flyers for the meeting. Her expression was tentative, and the weight of her skepticism echoed through the air. "Jake, have you thought more about how to engage people? I mean, you can't just hope they show up. Let us bring them in with compassion," he urged, feeling the tide of determination welling up. "Let us share what we've lived through and show that they're not alone. If we can create a space of trust, that might be the first step." Her brow furrowed, and Jake felt the sting of doubt creep back in. "And if they don't come?" The question hovered, thick with the fear of failure and the risk of rejection. The thought of failure gnawed at his soul, but he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. "Then we've still made a start. If just one person walks away feeling heard, we've succeeded." He could feel the tide of courage rising as he left Ms. Wong. Each step out of the center reaffirmed his commitment. He had to confront the storm of fear engulfing the community. Could he be the transformation they needed? That evening, Jake found himself pacing in his living room, a flurry of thoughts igniting his mind like fireworks. He recalled the faces of those who had fought through the system, families whose stories he had barely scratched the surface of. What sacrifices would he have to make to forge a path for them? As he picked up his phone, he opened his text messages, itching to garner interest. With each typed name, a flickering possibility ignited in his heart. But with that potential came the undeniable reality: he was on the brink of demanding change. Would his voice be strong enough? Would it resonate through the chasms of uncertainty? The moment felt precarious, almost electric. Just as he began to hit send on the first message, a notification dinged on his screen. Before he had a chance to turn away, he read the name. It sent a chill along his spine. It was from someone he had avoided since they last spoke, someone whose presence could either uplift or derail all his plans. The chaos of the moment intensified, and with it, Jake realized a truth: every personal sacrifice he made would lead him further into uncharted territory. The kind of territory where confronting a figure from his past could alter the stakes dramatically, shifting everything he thought he had secured. How could he navigate this unexpected re-entry into his past while building a future for others? His next steps were shrouded in uncertainty. Would he allow himself to be drawn into the old fears, or would he stand resolute for the community that depended on him? Jake's heart raced as he stared at the name on his screen, memories flooding back in a disorienting rush. It was Mia. The last time they spoke, their lives had taken unpredictable paths, and the shadows of their shared history loomed large over his burgeoning ambitions. He had always admired her resolve, but the weight of their past rendered him vulnerable. The notification heartlessly pulsed again, demanding attention. He was poised on the precipice of reviving forgotten connections while striving to forge new ones. What would Mia want now? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard, but the question gnawed at him: what if she disrupted everything he was working to build? With determination, he thumbed the screen and opened the message. "We need to talk," it read. The simplicity of the words struck a chord in him, igniting caution mixed with intrigue. This wasn't just a casual check-in, it felt urgent, possibly even necessary. But why? Jake struggled with conflicting emotions, the pull toward understanding mingled with dread. Every encounter with Mia had been a reminder of what he wanted: to escape uncertainty, chaos, and heartache. Yet, he recognized that exploring this invitation could mirror the path he'd chosen in his community work, confronting fears to build connections. He sat back, weighing his options. Avoiding her would mean fortifying the walls he constructed to keep his past at bay, at the cost of losing a precious opportunity for growth. Eventually, he took a deep breath and replied. When and where? As soon as the message left his fingers, he felt a surge of adrenaline. What would she say? Would she question his newfound commitment? Would her presence provoke panic that would undermine the momentum he was building for those in need? The reply was swift. Tomorrow, same place. The mention of same place sent a chill down his spine. It was where they'd spent countless evenings confiding dreams, fears, and disappointments. This meeting felt tantamount to putting everything on the table, but maybe it was what he needed to cement his resolve. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, heart pounding against the silence. Each thought spiraled into his head like shards of glass. He confronted the likelihood that he was stalling himself. Was he afraid of what Mia might expose about him? Or perhaps he feared she might inadvertently remind him of his perceived inadequacies? As dawn broke, he found himself in a contemplative haze. The morning ritual of coffee-making provided an anchor as he roamed through plans on how to invigorate his purpose despite the looming confrontation. His resolve strengthened. This meeting wasn't just about his past, it was a chance to reaffirm his commitment to his journey, to confront fears in more ways than one. Jake arrived at the cafe earlier than planned, scanning the surroundings as the scent of coffee enveloped him. Inside, energy buzzed with life, patrons deeply engaged in conversations. He felt a flicker of hope, perhaps the same could happen for his community life regrowth through hard conversations. Then she walked in. Mia hadn't changed much, her confidence radiated amidst the chaos. Yet, her eyes they held stories they hadn't shared in years, stories that could unlock doors or halt progression entirely. Jake, she said, voice steady but muffled by the din of cups clinking and whispers floating around them. Mia, he replied, swallowing hard. The words he'd prepared felt trapped in his chest, overshadowed by the weight of expectation. The moment stretched, an elastic band of nostalgia and tension, threatening to snap. Mia sat and looked straight at him. You've really decided to do this, haven't you? Jake felt the impact of her question expand in the air, a moment filled with unacknowledged potential. This was no longer just about community and support, it was now also intertwined with his past choices and the voice that had often kept him ensnared. What do you think I should do? He challenged, feeling a surge of defiance. The answer stirred deep within him still. Waiting to be unearthed. In this confrontation lay mutual vulnerability, both testing the limits of his growth and revealing fundamental truths. Could this dialogue with Mia illuminate hidden truths that would further his cause, offering clarity in the murky waters of his journey? As they exchanged stories, something shifted. He felt the undertow of their shared history changing the tides of understanding. Would recognizing old fears forge a new path forward? The weight of their conversation hung in the air, charged with possibility. Jake felt the tremors of self-discovery begin to pulse within him. Would he emerge inspired to confront the complexity of his past while stepping boldly into the future he envisioned for himself and others? The questions loomed, echoing like the last stages of uncertainty, pressing him to understand, was this catalytic moment an awakening or a revisit to the fears he thought he had laid to rest? Jake's pulse quickened as Mia's gaze pierced through him. Her presence was electric, reminiscent of a flare igniting buried emotions waiting to surface. The banter they once shared seemed suffocated in the weight of the moment. Of all the conversations he had prepared for, this was the most daunting. His heart, a drumbeat chanting for warmth but burdened by the chill of unresolved conflict. Jumping straight in, are we? Mia continued, an eyebrow arched playfully, but her eyes told a different story. They conveyed hours spent tossing in sleepless nights, mulling over decisions that had shaped their lives. Jake took a breath, pushing against the unease twisting in his gut. I have to commit, right? You know the stakes. A tremor betrayed his steady demeanor, the intensity of the moment folding over him like a shroud. Mia leaned in slightly, her expression softening. I really want to understand, Jake. The changes you're making, they matter. But are you sure you know what you're getting into? Sometimes the past isn't something you outrun. Her words pushed against the walls he'd carefully constructed. Was he just wielding his drive as a shield, while the specter of their shared past loomed threateningly over him? If he were honest, a part of him had always felt the remnants of that history-shaped decisions, etched a path that was riddled with heartache. As he was letting himself step boldly forward, was he also inviting ghosts along for the ride? Maybe I don't need to outrun it, he conceded more to himself than to her. What if instead I confront it? The thought sliced through the mental fog. This was where transformation began, not merely an exodus from chaos, but a grappling with pain to reclaim power over his narrative. Mia nodded, a flicker of surprise and respect crossing her features. The conversation shifted, an undercurrent of something vital threading through their histories. Do you remember the last night she hesitated, searching for the right words? Jake felt the air grow thick around them, plagued with memories that boiled under the surface, dangerous yet enticing. This wasn't a step back, it was an inquiry for clarity, a tool for growth. Yeah, I do. But that's not who I am anymore, he interrupted, channeling his emerging self-assurance. I'm working to help others and forge connections. It's like trying to plant roots in rocky soil. The metaphor hung between them, a bridge over tumultuous waters. Mia absorbed that, her steely demeanor softening further, though the flicker of concern manifested in her eyes again. And how do you know those roots won't wither when the past rains down? Her question posed a profound dilemma, leading him to reflect on the vulnerability that came with forging real connections. Could he withstand the storms of authenticity and confront the weathered emotions still buried deep within? Would his blossoming ambitions hold, fueled by idealism and stripped free of illusions? I guess only time can tell, he said carefully, his voice betraying a confidence that mingled with doubt. But I have to try. I don't want to live in fear of what was. The sincerity in his voice set a stark contrast to the hesitance that wrapped around them moments ago. Each word dissolved the distance between them, brick by brick. They began weaving their personal truths into a tapestry layered with both vulnerability and potential for collaboration. Mia chuckled, a hint of admiration lacing her tone. This is about more than just you, isn't it? You're looking to make lasting change. The affirmation warmed him. This connection wasn't just a nostalgic reminiscence or a farewell to the past. It was a realization that together they could mold a brighter purpose. He could leverage their shared history to propel them forward, to understand the hurt, and from it, help guide others toward healing. As they unraveled the threads of their past, Mia leaned closer, a willingness to explore further igniting between them. Yet beneath it all, Jake felt turmoil stir, not fear, but anticipation for a future cradled within uncertainty. Did he have the resolve to process this emotional unveiling, turning vulnerability into strength? Then, abruptly, the atmosphere shifted. The cafe suddenly grew loud around them, an eruption of laughter pulling them back to the moment. Jake's heart raced in tandem with the myriad thoughts battling for dominance in his mind. What if confronting these depths didn't just heal their rift but provided clarity in his journey? What if he unearthed something even more substantial than he anticipated, a truth that could reshape the very foundation of his aspirations? He realized now, the true challenge loomed ahead. The moment of truth awaited. Would he find the wisdom in his past to guide him, or would familiar shadows derail this emerging path? Time would unravel that mystery, but he felt ready for what lay ahead, ready to embrace whatever revelations awaited. As their connection deepened, the cafe ambience swirled around them, an echo of the life beyond their conversation. Jake knew one thing for certain: the horizon beyond this moment held the potential for profound discovery. They both sat there, threading paths of possibility as he muttered, "So where does this leave us?" Mia tilted her head slightly, a thoughtful smile playing on her lips, but Jake sensed the weight of her contemplation lurking beneath the surface. The question hung there, charged with significance: where did this leave them? Feeling the pressure of the moment, Jake shifted in his seat, his mind darting over their shared past and the implications of their present connection. How many times had he navigated through complexities, only to retreat at the first signs of discomfort? It was a familiar pattern he was determined to break, yet here he was, teetering on the edge of vulnerability and fear. What if we redefine it? Mia suggested unexpectedly, her voice steady, offering an alternative to the tension that had filled the air. We start fresh. Let us focus on what we can build together rather than what has held us back. That struck him, like a spark igniting dry kindling. What if he approached this situation as a canvas, one that wasn't marred by past brushstrokes, but rather a new opportunity to create something inspiring? Could they manifest a partnership rooted in mutual support, honesty, and understanding? I like that idea, he said, cautiously optimistic. But we should set clear intentions. I want to make sure we both understand where we stand and what we need. Mia nodded, and Jake could see the light of determination illuminating her features. This was the first time they were truly considering moving forward, not just reminiscing about what had been. He let that realization wash over him, releasing a breath he hadn't known he was holding. As they began to articulate their hopes, fears, and the expectations lurking in the shadows, Jake felt the barriers he had built around himself start to crack. He shared his vision for community impact, discussing ways he could leverage his experience to help others navigate through trauma his own past injected as both caution and inspiration. I want to show people that healing doesn't mean forgetting, he asserted, his heart racing with passion. It means constructing new narratives. Facing what hurt us can help guide those seeking solace. Maybe we can offer workshops or coaching sessions. Mia's eyebrows lifted, her expression revealing a mix of intrigue and admiration. That could be powerful, Jake. Real change happens when we incorporate our stories, and you have a narrative that can ignite hope. A wave of clarity crashed over him. What he had once seen as ghosts haunting his journey now transformed under the light of possibility as experiences he could share, instruments of empathy. The notion stirred something in him, a realization that tapping into those emotions might not only contribute to his mission but also reshape how he viewed himself. Are you sure you want to be involved? He asked, suddenly aware of the consequences of intertwining their paths again. It might be messy. Messy is just a part of it, she replied, her eyes steady. But that's where the learning happens. No one can avoid the mess forever. Jake felt something unsettling beneath her confidence. Was she aware of the weight of their past, the potential it had to sway their professional ambitions? But uncertainty couldn't halt progress. Could it be possible that confronting these paths, side by side, would foster growth rather than disillusionment? But what if we stumble back into old patterns? He pressed, needing to tether this momentum with honesty. Then we navigate them together, Mia said firmly, her voice unwavering. We'll hold each other accountable, pushing each other towards our best selves. Her unwavering gaze chipped away at Jake's reservations, igniting a spark of hope within him. The prospect of collaboration fused with vulnerability felt both radiant and terrifying, yet it cast a wide net of possibility. Could their shared vulnerability become the catalyst for deeper connections that not only healed their past wounds but created impactful change? Maybe this is the moment I stop hiding, he whispered, half in awe of the realization echoing in his mind. As they began mapping out their ideas, time slipped away. And the cafe took on a blur of colors, sounds, and human connections. Ideas flowed between them, each one more promising than the last, emboldening both their ambition and complicity. Yet with each enthusiastic proclamation, Jake felt an undercurrent of unresolved anxiety, the past lingering just beyond their reach, as if watching carefully, waiting for the chance to disrupt this fragile newfound alliance. Could he confront his inner fears while pursuing such ambitions? The clock was ticking, and he felt an unsettling energy thrumming beneath his skin. Just then, the door swung open violently, reverberating the cafe walls. Instinctively, they both turned to look, and there stood a stranger, the urgency on their face wrapping the air in suspense. Jake's pulse quickened, anticipation spiking. What could this stranger possibly want? Would this unexpected introduction derail their efforts, or perhaps steer them towards a revelation yet to be uncovered? Each possibility built a fragile bridge as curiosity gnawed at his resolve. What lay ahead was inevitably intertwined with what had come before. In that moment, he understood, this was just the beginning. Jake stood at the center of Eastworth Community Center, the room buzzing with a light that felt electric. Equally apprehensive and invigorated, he surveyed the diverse gathering of individuals whose lives mirrored the struggles he had begun to comprehend. Families from the neighborhood now faced him not as mere faces in passing, but as vital participants in a shared commitment to effect change. He had gathered the very people he aimed to uplift, bearing witness to their shared pain and hope. Mia stood by his side, her warmth a steadying presence. Their conversation from the cafe had sparked a partnership anew, transformed by earnest intentions. They had defined clear goals together, bringing the community into a dialogue amid the swirling chaos one family had experienced after another. Each conversation they had built upon one another had instilled a semblance of trust, and as he felt the weight of their collective gaze upon him, he knew he was held accountable for those shared stories. "Today isn't just about me," Jake began, his voice unwavering as he addressed the crowd. "It's about all of us. We've faced hardships that have clouded our paths. But I believe together we can reclaim our power." He felt the stirring ripple of agreement pass through the room, a tentative yet palpable hope. Jake took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. The stakes were high, but it was this commitment to vulnerability that nourished his conviction. One at a time, he began to share excerpts from their conversations, the tales of struggle that had been whispered behind closed doors. "Mrs. Morales has made sacrifices for her family's safety, but she is not alone. Each of you carries a story rife with secrets and strength. Together, let us lift each other and forge a brighter future." As he stepped back to take in the reactions, he noticed the reluctant nods of acknowledgement swelling amongst the once wary faces. An exhilarating rush flooded through him. This was a departure from simply being an observer of pain, to embrace accountability and action. Jake was no longer lost in the maze of his doubts. He felt a solid confidence emerging from the first-hand stories and the resolve forming in the hearts of those gathered. Inspired by the moment, Jake shouted into the supportive energy enveloping him, "What if we stand together? What if our voices echo louder than the silence we've all endured?" As applause erupted in response, an avalanche of sensation coursed through him. He could feel his heart race, not from the fear of vulnerability, but from the space they had created together. They were a chorus of resilience, amplifying one another's experiences, a shared strength that stunned him. Mia stepped up next, her soft yet assured voice weaving through the applause. "What Jake has shared is our foundation. But now we have to act. Large steps begin with measured movements. Today, we will outline next steps and build concrete actions that can lead us out of the shadows." In that moment, the spark of camaraderie ignited into a flame of collective determination. Over the subsequent hours, Jake facilitated discussions, weaving laughter into reflections of resilience, fear into courage, ensuring that everyone felt involved and valued. Each contribution transformed the gathering, actionable insights arising from collaborative brainstorming resonating throughout the room. Conversations flowed, laughter punctuated the air, and stories of struggles morphed into aspirations. Jake realized how far he had come from the soldier struggling back from the abyss of self-doubt to emerging as a leader drawing strength from others while extending his hand toward what still needed to be changed. As the meeting wound to a close, he felt a swell of recognition wash over him. They were no longer overshadowed by fears or lost in the throes of defeat. The flickers of doubt had been met with an unwavering resolve. Each family had promised to stand with one another, unearthing a network of cooperation and collective strength. With his heart brimming with pride and contentment, Jake knew he had not only rekindled his purpose but had proven to himself he could also lift others not just from trivial shadows, but from the abyss of despair he had once felt so deeply. The whispers had grown into shouts, echoes of empowerment reverberating off the walls of the community, the tangible realization of the change he sought. As families began to depart, exchanging thanks and shared smiles, a familiar little girl approached him, her bright eyes full of admiration. "Are you my hero now, Mr. Jake?" "It's not just me, Daisy," he replied, kneeling to match her gaze. "It's all of us, together." In that moment, he understood, this was only the beginning of their journey. Together, they had started to chart a path toward renewal, driving deeper connections that would ripple through the community, showing resilience was a collective effort. Jake stood upright, a newfound solid confidence radiating from him. He had forged his own path, transformed within the lives of others, and together they would achieve more than he had ever dared to dream. As he watched Daisy trot back to her family, he felt the shadows disperse and the dawn's light break through. In this awakening, Jake had not only conquered his personal fears but crafted a community revolution born out of vulnerability and palpable courage. Now, as he surveyed the bustling energy that had once seemed elusive, it was clear, Jake had claimed victory over both his past and present, stepping boldly into a future overflowing with possibilities. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that move hearts and inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. This moment means everything. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. What does it mean for Jake and the community? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion together. Let us amplify the message.